We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. There is no call.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frank.
You are hereby notified that a workshop meeting of the Palatka City Commission is called to be held on Thursday, March 23rd, 2017, at the regular meeting place of the Palatka City Commission, Palatka City Hall, 201 North 2nd Street, Palatka, Florida, to commence at 5 o'clock p.m. The purpose of the workshop is to hear a presentation of the Florida Rural Water Association proposed City of Palatka wastewater and potable water fiscal sustainability analysis and asset management plan. We'll now have our invocation by Commissioner Williams, and she'll also lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to come together tonight, and we're asking that you guide our thoughts and our actions tonight and lead us in the right direction. We ask all these blessings in your precious Son, Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill,
Here.
Commissioner Borum,
Present.
Commissioner Campbell,
Present.
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
and Commissioner Brown is two absent.
Moving on to public comment. We'll have open public comment up at this time. No action will be taken on topics of discussion. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. We'll now move on to item 2 of the agenda, a presentation of the City of Palatka wastewater and potable water fiscal sustainability analysis and asset management plans developed by the Florida Rural Water Association. Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, sir. Just quickly, I want to introduce everybody we have here from Rural Water. We got Mr. Troy County, who's going to give a presentation of the wastewater plan. Mr. Jason Sparks is going to give a presentation of the water treatment and water distribution plan, and Mr. David Harris. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cassidy, and we'll jump right in. Thank you.
All right, pleasure meeting you all. Thank you very much for allowing us to attend the workshop today. And I have probably about a 10-minute PowerPoint slide to kind of give you an overview of the asset management program and how it was implemented. And the actual work, obviously, y'all have all the other books to kind of review and study. We had worked on this project, the wastewater side, for a little over a year, about a year and a half, in developing the full report. Again, there's 4 of us that work on the asset management program for Florida Rural Water. Bill Archibald, he's the only one that works with me on the wastewater side that isn't in attendance. The State Revolving Fund Loan Program was designed for construction and procurement. And what they're saying is they developed a new rule, 62503-700, which requires clean water state revolving funds as well as the drinking water fund program recipients to develop an asset management plan. So part of receiving those fundings is now that the city has to have an asset management plan in place in receiving that. And that plan identifies all assets with project through the sponsor of the system, and evaluations of current age, condition, and anticipated useful life of each asset. The current value of the asset and the cost to operate and maintain these assets. With a system that is the size of Palatka, we obviously didn't evaluate all 1,300 manholes. We did do every lift station. We did roughly about 20% of the manholes throughout different areas of the town to have a good representative sample. The next slide shows typical life expectancies of utility assets. And for the most portion, collection system distribution systems were kind of built or put up to higher standards around 1970s when the Clean Water Drinking Act was established. And this was particularly on the wastewater side. Some of those assets, like electrical, it shows 15 to 20 years, and then the assets kind of, on electric, you can obviously get more than 20 years out of it, but electrical changes and upgrades usually will take place. Energy conservation changes, so you'll want to upgrade to more advanced electrical standards. The manholes typically are 20 to 50 year life expectancy. Storage tanks, wastewater particular is 30 to 60 years. Some of your pump stations between 40 and 50 years. And in collection system, PVC pipes generally about 80 to 100 years in ground. Now the older piping is definitely way less than that, and that's kind of where you're at now with a system of a lot of older piping. And these other items are, if they were put in around the mid to late 70s, well, they're probably nearing their life expectancy. Components of the asset management plan for the collection system, again, was asset evaluation. And with the evaluation, we develop a condition and criticality of each component that we review. So condition is a national standard for sewer systems that we utilize, and it's on a basis of 0 to 5. And 0, it's either abandoned or no longer in use. 1 is it's in excellent shape. 5 is it should have been replaced real soon, or it needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And then on the criticality, 5 is very critical. 1 is not that critical to the system. So we come up with a condition of criticality for both. Then we kind of look at what the life expectancy of the item should be and where the life expectancy is as far as its useful life remaining. We also take a look at financial analysis. We create a system valuation, and then we take a look at rate analysis, growth projections, operation and maintenance reinvestment, and a 5-year CIP plan. Other things that are included in the asset management is contingency planning, emergency preparation, and then a good segment on energy conservation and suggestions. And then ultimately we kind of do an overview on administrative and personnel and training. Funding and renewal replacement capital investments and capital improvements. AWWA manual kind of suggests between 5 and 15% of your budget should be supplied towards operation and maintenance and capital. That varies based upon the improvements that have already taken place in the current facility age and conditions, obviously. With the market value that we had did, the wastewater treatment facility, taking our estimated values, we estimated at roughly $17,600,000. The effluent disposal, roughly $1.1 million, and a collection system, a little over $21 million, which gives a combined asset value of $40 million. And then our recommended budget was we would shoot for about 2.5%. This is kind of to get you in the right direction started, because on the wastewater side, we realize that you have the 5 to 15% plus what issues you may have with your drinking water side is going to be a major task to try to take on all at one time. So we reduced ours to roughly 2.5%, which puts it at roughly a $1 million CIP and R&R. Some of the recommendations that I wanted to point out in the asset management plan, and a couple of these are projects that you all are already looking at doing through the SRF funding program, is the conversion to aerobic digester. I know there was talks about going with the BCR process, and I think we've kind of went the other route. Regardless, the estimated time frame we expect this to be done is within 1 to 2 years. In part of doing the digester rehabilitation or conversion to another process, you will also be addressing the belt press and the conditions of that. The other capital improvement project is secondary clarifier replacement, which is probably going to run either just after the biosolids project and then the clarifier next. Kind of have it at 1 year, but I could see that probably moving out a little bit further. And with this plan, it's not set in stone that what we recommend, you have to do it accordingly. That there is room for, once it's adopted, that it's your plan, it's a living document, and that you utilize it to create how you're going to go on with your evaluations from that point and handling the capital and R&R. The other thing that we made note to was rehabilitate and use the leachate receiving station. That probably should be upgraded. It was a suggestion that we put in. Currently, I think they have dumping at a couple manholes, and I just kind of felt like it would be more appropriate to be closer monitored and maybe have it at the plant. Now, that being said, that's something that they need to discuss and work out because it could potentially affect the plant quicker as well. So that's something that, Brian should, take his expertise in place on that as well. Couple other minor O&M items, and again, like we said, we looked at virtually about every component. So there are some that are low-hanging fruit that's easy tasks that can be handled, and a lot of times those may be the tasks that you want to tackle first from the standpoint that these others are going to dedicate more money and more time towards. So the low-hanging fruit, such as trip hazards, which was one that we've seen where walking up to the brand new filters is just enough spot there that somebody could, accidentally get their foot caught in there. Minor issue, but it should be addressed. Disinfection system, currently you're using chlorine gas. One of our recommendations from a safety standpoint is consider the conversion to sodium hypochlorite. So that's something to take in consideration. I had that projected at a time frame, again, roughly between 1 and 3 years. Facility upgrading, lighting is another one that we bring to light, and it's something that SRF funding is really key to in the asset management is energy conservation, and typically that's again a easy grab, low-hanging fruit that can be upgraded at a relatively cheaper cost than some other items. And when I was out at the treatment facility, there was a few lights that needed some improvements. And then we look at facility pumping, replacement, and upgrading as we do upgrade, converting to more of energy efficient pumps and motors. And that's roughly within the next 5 to 10 years. And again, that's obviously dependent upon the criteria of the stations or equipment that was evaluated at that time. So there may be more that's sooner and others not quite as long. The collection system we looked at, and we had 4 stations that are roughly within 2 to 4 years that should be some sort of rehabilitation, and that was kind of looking at liners installed into them, high-density polyurethane liners to protect from the hydrogen sulfide gas corrosion that's currently eating up the station itself. And as that gets more aggressive, it'll tear away the concrete, and eventually you'll have to change out the whole structure. So this will give you back some of that extra useful life that it's may be losing at this point. And then again at the bottom right here, this kind of gives you a guideline of what our rating number was and how many there was of each one that we looked at as far as manholes. And it shows like we had 3 that we actually said that you should just continue to monitor on a routine basis. 20 with some miscellaneous repairs, minor repairs that are the low-hanging fruit type ones. And then we had 48 that have some miscellaneous repairs, mortar, epoxy coating, the little bit more expensive work. And then roughly 44 that are at that point that really need to be focused on and have liners installed and that type of more capital improvements. And this is just from the 100 that we looked at, not the whole 1,300 manholes within your system. So we're roughly only at, what, 10% of the manholes? So, yeah. So that's kind of where we're at, and as you get to really look into the actual plan, I guess you'll probably have more questions, but do you have any questions for me at this time?
Just on the things that you evaluated, if you were to do like something like a Pareto chart to say, okay, well, hey, here's our top 5 or top 10 things that we need to go after right away, what would those be, and what would it look like?
A good point, and I didn't, because of the time factor, I didn't address every one of them, but they're definitely in the book, and they're listed in that way as condition criticality, and I have the highlighted actually on the manholes. I went to a little bit further detail and highlighted the ones in yellow that are like, we need to take care of these now, kind of plan for these into the future budgeting. And then in the wastewater treatment facility, we identify and break out each component and kind of do the same thing, say that this should be done at this time, and we identify each one of them.
And your manholes, just in general, how long does it take to just, on average, to do a evaluation of a manhole on average?
Good question, and that's one thing that we did bring into play also in there, that we recommend that the staff, and that's part of the continual upgrading and revising the asset management plan, that they continue on where we left off at and continue inspecting each manhole. And I believe for this system, I think I said roughly if you do 9 manholes a month, just 9, checking them and inspecting them, and typically the inspection is, depending on if you're able to locate it right off bat, 10 to 15 minutes max per manhole. So within 5 years, you can virtually get all of them and then start back over and do that on a routine basis, But it doesn't have to be where you got to spend 8 hours a day to do, so many. It's just try to get them all done within 5 years and start at the beginning, the 6th year where you begin at the 1st year. And roughly, I believe it was like 9.6 manholes a month or something like that. And I did identify that in there as well.
So would our staff be doing some of that, or would your group do it all?
At this point, your staff would pretty much take over some of this, but when I say that, no, we are free. We have circuit riders, including myself, that if they need additional help, we're there for that purpose, and that's part of the implementation portion of the adoption program. Once this is adopted, we don't just walk away from the city and say, okay, we got adopted, we're done. We have the next phase, which is called implementation, and we want to see that you're following through with most of the tasks, how you're getting done, do you need any assistance? And one of the items that we usually start with is smoke testing. Does the system need to have the system re-smoke test? And I bring that up. And if that's the case, we do have the equipment, and we'll come out and supply the equipment and assistance typically a day. If we have a couple of days, we'll come out and assist more in that, but generally we assist with it one day, we give them training, leave the equipment there, and then when they're done, we'll pick it back up. So, yeah, but definitely we see you through the whole process and ongoing. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll give it to Jason Sutherland.
Thank you, Troy.
Morning.
thank y'all for having us here tonight. Want to express my gratitude for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. A lot of meetings I go to, they don't, they'll give you a moment of silence to do with as you will. I want to compliment Mr. Griffith, Mr. McCamey, and I didn't work with Mr. McCann there, but with Mr. Register for their professionalism and obvious care and concern about the drinking water system. The drinking water system is comprised, obviously, of a water treatment plant and a water distribution system. A lot of what Troy said, I don't want to just repeat, but we follow a very, very similar process. We do a little more in-depth investigation on the drinking water system, but with a heavy reliance on the system staff and personnel that are working with the system on a daily basis, operating and maintaining the system. So I had a few meetings with Mr. Register out at the plant, a few meetings with Mr. Griffith and Mr. McCamey down on the Public Works building, and we gathered up as much information as we could about the water distribution system and the water treatment plant. And then it's basically a function of myself or staff. David Herring did a lot of the field investigation, the data collection at the plant and the distribution system, and turned that raw data over to me and processed it into the asset management plan. This is my first large system. It's a large document, but a lot of it is appendices. The actual document itself is only about 30 to 40 pages that has the information in it about what's recommended, like Troy said, the condition and criticality ratings. And I'd just like to go through my brief presentation here and say that basically I call it an FSAMP, the Fiscal Sustainability and Asset Management Plan for your drinking water system, prepared with guidance from DEP rules and EPA guidance documents. Tried to follow them to the T, putting this document together and explore all of the areas that are important to a water utility. All right. We have a condition assessment that I performed on all assets, water system assets. When we say assets, we mean wells, well pumps, well motors, well casings, water services, water pipes, valves, meters, backflow preventers, so on and so forth. So we started at the wells and basically went to the meters, fire hydrants, and I did a condition assessment and then a criticality assessment. We used the same scale, 0 to 5 on both, 5 being the worst condition and worst criticality, or have the biggest impact on the system if there is a loss or a leak or an issue with that asset. We'll also look at preventive maintenance procedures, existing preventive maintenance procedures like valve exercising and hydrant flushing, greasing, grease fittings and bearings and belts and belt tightening and pulleys and motor megging and just on and on and on. Preventive maintenance, which is, I use the analogy to your vehicle, your car, your brakes being replaced, your oil being changed, your tires. We've noticed at several systems that some systems have neglected or are challenged with preventive maintenance and upkeep of their assets. Not necessarily the case here with Palatka, but it's kind of like, especially at the plant, you know, that plant runs 24/7. So it's like driving your car with the gas pedal to the floor 24/7 and not ever changing the oil or brakes or tires or what have you. We look at rehab and renewal projects that are underway, and we try to make informed decisions based on the life cycle of assets as well as the risk associated with them and the total cost of ownership. This is a checkup program for small systems. As we come in, or in the 21st century, there's a software or an app for just about everything these days. This is EPA developed a checkup program for small systems, which is a computerized maintenance management system, or CMMS. It can be used for water, wastewater, stormwater, different utilities. And it's basically a way to track work orders and maintenance tasks, set up reminders to remind us to grease bearings and change belts, and sample for chlorine, check our flow meter, calibrate our flow meters, so on and so forth, as well as it begins though with an inventory of your system, and that's basically, we inventoried the water treatment plant, we inventoried the distribution system, but a lot of that piping information was supplied by Mr. Griffith. We didn't walk every foot of pipe out there and exercise every valve and every hydrant. We rely on those guys for the field data collection and kind of a condition.
His guys did walk it off.
Did they? Yeah, that's a good thing. But that being said, I know there are some sections of the distribution system that are challenging out there, and Mr. Griffith and I have talked about them, and Mr. McCain and myself. And this computerized maintenance management system is not as robust as it could be, and Public Works already uses an iWorks CMMS, or they're migrating to the one that has a geospatial component as well, which is a mapping component. And that's really the foundation or the heart of an asset management system, is having a good computerized mapping system, map of your system, your water distribution, wastewater system. The plant is more of a, it's on one piece of land. It's not as spread out and geospatially large. However, there's a lot of the same work orders, and not the same, but there are work orders and routine maintenance and preventive maintenance, probably more so required at the plant. There's a lot more widgets / assets at the plant that require attention. So we implemented this. I actually populated this checkup program for small systems with the R.O. Willis wastewater or water treatment plant data, and downloaded it with David Keene, Mr. Keene's help. David, and anyway, out there at the water plant on Mr. Register's computer so that he could start using it. That was back around the end of January, because they didn't have a work order system really at all. So it was kind of difficult to review service records and what pieces of equipment had been rehabilitated or renewed or upgraded. There wasn't a lot of history there. We're building that history now. Very similar situation with the water distribution system. As far as my review, I was provided a lot of data, good data, from Mr. Griffith on the age of the piping, pressurized piping in the distribution system, the age and the material. And those are fairly critical factors when evaluating underground pressurized water piping. With a collection system, wastewater, you can TV it, run a TV camera down it and inspect pipes, but that is not the case in a water distribution system. Now they have methods of exploring pressurized piping using what they call smart balls that you insert into the pressurized pipe through hydrants or launch ports, and they actually have an electronic mapping system inside the smart ball that tells the inside diameter of the pipe. So if it's a metal pipe, you can tell where there's constrictions or possibly degradation of the pipe. You know, it's larger than it should be. I don't want to get too much into detail on the exploration, possible explorations. Mr. Griffith and Mr. McCamey seem to be fairly well in the know on the latest technologies. My evaluation, my criticality and condition evaluation was based on really the year. Some of the pipe going back to 1886, 1890, on up to 2011 was the records that I had. And there's some other pipe out there as well that we're a little straddling the fence over as far as the age of it. So through looking at the assets at the water treatment plant and the water within the water distribution system, we developed a matrix, if you will, or the rating system was applied, the condition and criticality. And within the report, within the appendix C, there is a condition and criticality rating system where I prioritized. I did come up with 5 top projects, but they're big projects, and I'll get to those in a second. But there's several hundred or so thousands of feet of pipe out there that, based on their age and material, require replacement. And I know that Mr. Griffith and Mr. McCamey are aware of those areas. So I did not try to drill down and say this pipe needs to be replaced on this date. I just bring the information to everyone's attention at the plant and the distribution system. And once this asset management plan is adopted and implemented, it can be changed right after it's adopted. You know, right after the city commission adopts it, we can turn around and change numbers in it. I hope that's what happens, really. I hope things change. It is meant to be used and made more realistic than the numbers that are there. So I'll shift gear. We've been talking about asset management. The fiscal sustainability side of it is the financial side. I'm an engineer. I'm not an accountant or financial person, so I'll do the best I can with what I have. We basically, Troy's way for the wastewater system works well with the wastewater system asset management as far as looking at budget numbers, and we are following some similar sort of methodology there in the water system. However, I've worked for a utility for several years in my career in the wastewater engineering division, and we used spreadsheets. We actually used spreadsheets to project our next fiscal year's budget, as well as a 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year budget. So I used and developed spreadsheets for the purpose of projecting what budgets, hypothetical budgets should be. The real numbers need to be entered and populated by Mr. Griffith and Mr. McCamey as far as what this system can stand, and Mr. Suggs as well. I'm sure will have a big part in that. Now, one of the missing budget components in water systems, utility systems in general, is an R&R, rehabilitation and renewal, replacement and renewal reserve fund. And those funds are typically set aside each year in an account that is only touched when it's needed to replace a piece of equipment that's reaching the end of its useful life. The useful lives, like Troy talked about, for the manholes, very similar. For all the pieces of equipment at the wastewater plant, electrical equipment has a certain amount of life, meters, and other assets in the water distribution system. So I used best professional judgment numbers for the cost of replacement for each piece of equipment at the plant and the pipelines out in the system, which would include valves and hydrants, I would think at the time, if the hydrants were fairly well aged also for the city maintained hydrants. Like I said earlier, the three budget areas that I look at in my analysis are the routine operation and maintenance and preventive maintenance. And those numbers apply to the plant as well as the distribution and collection system. I'm sure a lot of that is budgeted for now within the current budget and the current operating expenses. I don't know that it's what should be, the amount that should be being budgeted for is there. However, we're doing what we can with what we have. Capital improvement plan, project plan budget is the money set aside to improve the water plant or the distribution system on an annual basis. So this routine O&M and preventive maintenance budget, I believe, is around, I estimated it at around $1 million. The CIPP budget for the water treatment plant is a little different, very different than the water distribution system. And instead of trying to speculate and put dollars and projects down that I didn't know were going to be done or not, I just kind of, then again, using best professional judgment, populated some numbers in there for each budget year. However, the reserve replacement and renewal fund, which is Appendix B in the document, are the spreadsheets. Those are fairly hefty funds. And these are the highest priority projects that I determined Palatka should be aware of, the city should be aware of, the commission, the utility. I'm sure that the utility is. They're dealing with leaks and failing equipment, patching up and repairing. You can only run so long, though, you know what I'm saying, before you just have to replace. And we've learned through field research and working with other systems, you know, that it's a much smarter and more intelligent way to approach asset management through replacing when it's nearing the end of that useful life, and not trying to necessarily, unless you can renew things or rehabilitate and get a few more years out of them, depends on the piece of equipment and what's going on with it. Pipes, though, underground, I mean, they're either leaking or they're not leaking, you know, and you fix a leak here and the next day there's a leak 2 feet away and then a leak 2 feet away. I mean, you're spending more money on emergency call-outs at night and repairs to the water distribution system than if you would have just bit the bullet and installed a new pipeline with valves and get a new 40-year life out of it. So the water distribution system piping on this slide, and it's in the first few pages of the plan there actually, is about 8.2 million. And that's the pipe that's 131 years old, all the way through to pipe that has less than 5 years remaining life on it. It's not every single pipe out in the system. And the critical assets at the water plant is about 3.7 million looking at it. Now, these aren't going to be fixed next fiscal year, probably won't be fixed over the next 5 fiscal years. However, these numbers are the same numbers that are in that document. And then this item number 3 on my presentation, the funds required to establish, sustain, and increase the drinking water system comprised of the water treatment plant and the distribution system, R&R reserve fund, is about 11.9. And that's basically adding number 1 and number 2 together. Now, will this number change? Sure it will. Once you make some improvements next year through your $1 million or $500,000 or $2 million investment in the system to take care of these worst off assets out there, these numbers are going to change each year. They're going to change due to, the engineering cost index. every 3% every year, budgets increase. So item 4 there is actually implementing the computerized maintenance management system. Geodatabase is another terminology for the GIS. Valve exercising program, meter change-out programs. Meters, they don't stay good forever. They lose their accuracy. You have to change them out. A lot of systems I've worked with, they have a 5 to 10 year change-out plan, or when they reach a million gallons, whichever comes first usually. We did 5 years. It's just one I used to work with, but I talked to one yesterday, similar size to here, and they did a 10-year. They do a 10-year change-out frequency. There's some funding out there available. DEP State Revolving Fund, USDA Rural Development, Enterprise Florida. There's other ways to, you can look on our website as well. That 4th bullet, there's our funding sources that we've identified from Florida Rural Water. Some of them are Florida Rural Water or National Rural Water funding options. Another way to fund is to reduce operating costs, restructure the utility, restructure public works or the distribution and collections division. And then, last but certainly not least, are rate adjustments, but we try to, and a lot of times it's a combination of all of these, if we can't generate, if we just find that our expenses outweigh our revenues, we have to look at some of these other outside options, and they may just be temporary or, for a few years. And I'm sure Jonathan knows about the SRF, because I think y'all have some funding on the wastewater side. Any questions? Sorry to have been long-winded.
Pretty good presentation.
Feel free to call me and email me. We usually, from this point, we go through an adoption process. We can adopt it with revisions or changes. If we were to get together between now and the adoption, or whenever the adoption occurs, we can modify some things. Yes, sir, you look like
Well, I'm about to get it up.
maybe.
As far as the rates are concerned, what did you determine?
Well, you want me to cut to the chase on it, or no sugar coating?
No sugar in here?
I determined through research that rates, not just in Palatka, this is throughout the state and the country, our infrastructure is a D+ rating in the United States. Rates are typically increased quite a bit. And in this instance, to generate $15 million a year, these numbers, you have to increase your base rate from the existing amount to about $200, just for the base rate, about $200 a customer. And that's with no outside funding either.
Wow.
And that's to generate that amount. If you get a 20-year SRF loan, where you repay a certain amount back each year, the rates are like 0.1%. Right now, you could borrow $20 million. I was talking with some guys earlier about it, because like I say, I'm no financial or accounting person at all. We always, yes.
0.1% is the reduction in the loan, not the actual loan.
So it's 0.9.
It could be whatever the rate is currently. If it's 3.3%, it would be 2.9.
I like the 0.1%.
Yeah.
on
Well,
Okay.
Shannon, Tallahassee said 0.1. That would be the rate. I know that's the reduction, but that's the rate also.
So if we gave the
But
reduction
anyway.
0.1, and we at 0, if it's 0.1 reduction and the 0.1 is rate, then we got at 0.
Right.
So that we can take.
Yeah, and there is,
We were told on the wastewater side, we were at 0.
yeah,
They have loan forgiveness portion,
Right.
yeah.
so that could be it. But typically, it's a 0.1% rate reduction
Off a
for
permit.
developing an asset management plan,
Okay.
is the way it's worded.
Okay.
And, before I forget about it, the asset management plan adoption helps the system be more eligible for grant funding and a bigger portion of grant funding versus loans. And like Troy said, I've seen it happen recently with systems that have existing loans. There's a loan forgiveness. But this asset management plan is a key part of that loan forgiveness. And you, in your SRF loan application, I know we want to do grants as much as we can, but make sure there's a line item in there for whatever the project may be or project that we're looking to get funded for asset management plan revision and update and implementation. It can't be a sole project for asset management plan, but the SRF guys in Tallahassee said we could have any system can ask for line item in their funding application. So I believe that's it for me. Like I said, the numbers are what they are. I don't like to sugarcoat things, and I was asked to play Sherlock Holmes and Dick Tracy and leave no rock unturned. And I like to do a good job for our members as well. And I treat Palatka no different than anybody else, any other system. Okay?
Okay.
Thank y'all for having us again.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, a little bit late tonight, but I want to tell you all, I'm Melvin Register, I'm the city water plant manager, and I want to tell you, the Florida Rural Water Association has done nothing but do us good deeds, okay? They have helped us out much over the years, and in this plan, they come up with something that we have long needed in this city, okay? Over the years, we've been kicking the can down the road.
So we can't kick it anymore.
We can't kick the can down the road anymore, okay? And I know our city leaders have been striving to talk with the city, with the state and the governments to do its thing. And I tell you, we need those things. We really do. We put out quality water here. We really do. But once it gets downtown, if there's old pipes downtown, it becomes something different. And we get regular calls on it. Okay? We try to do the best we can. We have a flushing program. We're doing well. We're meeting all the standards that have to be met, okay? Barely. Okay? But we are also falling behind on our preventive maintenance, on our maintenance, the old stuff needs to be replaced. We're falling behind on that. And this is something we need to address. And I know these numbers are somewhere out there in the ether to us, because I've been with this city for a long time. And we've not been able to put a reserve back for a long time. But it has to be done. It's got to fall on somebody, okay? And I live in the city, okay? I actually pay the water bill and taxes here in the city. I got no problem with that. I know the water's safe to drink, but I'd like to see it come out of my faucet clear instead of yellow or red or whatever, you know? That's the way it is. Okay? But I'll tell you, unless we do something now, we got to do something. We've been kicking the can down the road too long. And this is just me talking, okay? I'm a private citizen talking as your city water utility manager, okay? We're putting out good water. We're putting out good water. But it has to get to the end of the line in the same state that what we got there, huh? And if we don't do something about it pretty soon, we got water lines been in the ground since 1886, okay? Ain't been long since we dug up the last wooden pipes in this town, about 20, 30 years ago, maybe. Yeah, he knows that. But we're in a place now that we need to do something about it. And I'm just a private citizen and working for you guys. I'm working for you guys. I want to tell you, we need to do something about it now. And this is about the best chance we've had at it in a long time. In a long time. So if you want to say no, we'll keep on dealing with it. We'll keep on working with it. But you know what? We got to do something. You guys are the ones to make a plan. You're my bosses. Okay? You're my bosses. Please take this baton and do something about it, because this has been one that's been passed on too long.
No, I've been the first one to tell you, you're probably preaching to the choir here. We stand on the same ground that you're standing on. And we've been running all around the country, trying to find ways to resolve the same problem. We've seen it, and we said it over and over again. I'm sure Commissioner Campbell's going to say something very similar. But we agree with you that the can has been kicked down the road for a long time, and it's time to do something. And we're definitely, we've been looking at it. We've been working hard to devise that plan. I think staff has been working at it diligently. Mr. Griffith, Mr. Suggs, we've been, Mr. Mills, everybody, you guys have all been working diligently to try to come up with an answer. The biggest thing for us is numbers. But I can tell you, whatever we can do, you've seen the concepts of tax increment funding as a method to do more with less.
Yes.
And so we're moving in that right direction. I mean, we appreciate your plea, and it's not going on deaf ears. When we walked in the door 2.5 years ago, I can tell you, we understand what it is to be in that position. So I definitely think that the presentation was one that was necessary.
Yeah,
and
it's heartfelt, I can tell you that.
The biggest thing now is to come up with a way to do it in a fiscally responsible manner, but also to deal with the most critical issues and not just pass them along anymore. So we're working on that, and I can assure you that, your heartache is not going on deaf ears.
Mr. Mayor, I tell you, I've been with the city for a long time, and I got just a few years left to go, okay? And this is one of the things that I would love to see happen before my tenure in Riverwood here, okay? I would love to see something
I think,
happen, because this has been going on for so long.
right, and I think, not to rehash everything that Mayor Hill said, but I think we're at a position, because when we take these trips out of town, we're taking them and meeting with the individuals. We make the decisions on local level. However, we have those that are above us that really make the decisions, and we have been pleading, thanks to our staff, we have, when we meet with these different senators, these congressmen, a packet that we present to them that shows the conditions of our water, the water system. So it's one thing that it's at the top of our list, and I think we're probably at a time now that we're at a good time now. And I believe that from the state level coming down, I believe that eventually there's going to be some good news for the city of Palatka and Putnam County.
I believe it is too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry for putting that on you, but it
No,
was what it was.
it's some things already in
there.
The same water that comes out of your faucet comes out of ours too. So
Yes,
it's one of
sir.
those things
I'm
that,
sorry. That is it. That is it. I drink the same water you do.
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It's a comprehensive plan already in place, and some things are in the works that
Thank you very
might
much.
see coming.
And
your way
next week
soon.
I'll be back off of vacation, so
Yes, sir.
then y'all can come in.
All right.
Mr. Griffin.
Commissioners, first I just want to thank Rural Water for everything they've done. Obviously, these meetings are quite lengthy and hard to digest in one sitting.
Yeah.
The important thing that I want to note is that they are manageable. We're not locked into what's in the documents. I would encourage you to consider adopting the plans as is, and we can use them and amend them on an annual basis as needed. They are manageable. We do have copies of the spreadsheets. We can modify them as we go through the budget process at your direction. I believe Matt, if there's time, could quickly explain the rate increase. Otherwise, we could do it under the agenda item in the commission meeting. He just ran some preliminary numbers. We could talk about an hour, we could break, and you could have the conversation under the agenda item.
Let's do it on the agenda item. Okay. Huh?
You want to talk about them then?
You won't be here. I'll do my best.
Okay.
Let's take a, let's take a 5-minute break. Let's take a 5-minute break and then discuss that and come back.
Okay.
Terry,